After days of speculation, Taiwanese broadcaster TVBS is claiming that Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the US House of Representatives, will arrive in the Taiwanese capital Taipei on Tuesday night. The pit stop has not yet been added to Pelosi's official itinerary as she travels through Asia. If she does arrive in Taiwan, perhaps making an unofficial visit there, she would nevertheless be the most senior US government official to set foot on the island for 25 years. At a time of tremendous tension between the US and China generally, Beijing has warned that her presence in Taiwan could create a potentially incendiary flashpoint. Reports say Pelosi is expected to stay overnight, but none of this is confirmed. Beijing, meanwhile, continues to condemn any suggestion that the Speaker of the House of Representatives might make a Taiwanese pit stop.
It is, shall we say, not everything.
If US House Speaker Pelosi goes to Taiwan, it will be a gross interference in China's internal affairs, seriously undermine China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, wantonly trample on the One China principle, seriously threaten peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, and seriously damage China-US relations, leading to a very serious developments and consequences. If the Speaker of the House, Pelosi, visits Taiwan, the Chinese side will definitely take resolute and strong countermeasures in response and defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. As to what measures, if she dares to go, then let us wait and see.
In Washington, it's reported that the Pentagon is working around the clock, monitoring Chinese movements in the region and implementing plans to keep Pelosi safe. Something they would be doing under any circumstances, of course, but the moves are given added impetus because of the Taiwan issue. China claims Taiwan as its own under the One China policy, a stance that has often flared tensions between Washington and Beijing. Last week, during his phone call with Chinese President Xi Jinping, President Joe Biden had a difficult discussion about Taiwan. He reiterated US policy, saying that Washington strongly opposes unilateral efforts to change the island's status quo or undermine peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits. Earlier, when asked about Pelosi's stop at Taiwan, Biden said that the US military does not think she should visit the island. He said unnamed officials described the idea as unhelpful. But the White House said it's up to Pelosi to decide where she travels. She represents a co-equal branch of the US government, they said, and President Biden has no right to dictate her itinerary. Pelosi's potential visit comes ahead of a crucial meeting of the Chinese Communist Party, at which President Xi Jinping is hoping to secure a third term in office. The Speaker has rarely withheld her criticism of the Chinese Communist Party. In the past, she has met with the exiled Tibetan leader Dalai Lama, and in 1991 she unfurled a black and white pro-democracy banner in Tiananmen Square to commemorate the victims of the massacre in 1989. She also recently voiced support for Hong Kong's pro-democracy protesters. The Speaker is currently in Singapore on the first leg of her Asia tour. There she met the country's Prime Minister and the Singaporean President. Pelosi will later visit Malaysia, South Korea and Japan, and perhaps also Taiwan. So, to WION's US correspondent Susan Tehrani, who joins us live today from New York City. Susan, what's going on here? Is this an effort really to have Nancy Pelosi set foot on Taiwanese soil in some kind of an unofficial way, as opposed to adding it to the official itinerary, creating the opportunity for all the reaction to this to be slightly damped down?
You know, because all of this trip has been playing out so publicly in real time, it's not clear whether or not making this trip a quote-unquote unofficial visit would really change anything at this point in terms of China's reaction. And many believe that while, China will probably have a pretty strong reaction, it's really going to stop short of some sort of confrontation, notably because of Xi Jinping's political situation in the country, the economic challenges that he's facing. So the reaction of official or unofficial would probably send the same signal. The only problem with that is, again, it would put part of this administration in a situation where it didn't take a step full-fledged. It was, again, something that was sort of in the middle. Some analysts believe that it'll have a good outcome for U.S.-China relations if it's not on the itinerary. But, we'll have to wait and see. Many others believe that China only responds well and respects force.
And Susan, can you address this issue of the relationship between President Biden and Nancy Pelosi? I mean, they're both from the same political party. He's the president, she's the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Putting the constitutional niceties of all this to one side, I mean, if he picked up the phone and said, Nancy, please don't go to Taiwan, she wouldn't go, would she?
Well, that's the thing. Nancy Pelosi has taken overseas trips with herself on her own before, for example, to Syria when former President Bush was in office. The peculiar nature of this trip was that, she's taking a trip despite a president from her own party signaling that the administration perhaps is saying it's better for her not to take the trip on the one hand, and the Pentagon is also saying the same. But as you mentioned, on the other hand, one has to wonder whether or not President Biden's recent quote-unquote statements that had to be walked back regarding whether or not, the United States would defend Taiwan, regarding him being ambiguous about the United States' ambiguous stance regarding Taiwan and so on and so forth. Were they really gaffes? And is this, all of this playing so publicly once again, is this something that the administration had planned before to be somewhat ambiguous and on the one hand, saying that the Biden administration perhaps prefers Nancy Pelosi not to go, but then Nancy Pelosi going anyway?
Susan, we will keep an eye and see what she decides to do. That's WION's US correspondent Susan Tehrani joining us live from New York. Now, the latest from China and their angry reaction to the mere suggestion that the Speaker of the House of Representatives might visit Taiwan. It comes from WION's correspondent in Beijing, Patrick Falk, who has just sent us this report.
Yeah, this is a big development we're hearing about here just a short while ago, saying that a visit by Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan is indeed going ahead. This was from CNN, citing Taiwanese and American officials. There is a real lack of detail, and we might want a little bit more confirmation, a little bit more information before we can say with absolute certainty that this is happening, particularly on such a sensitive topic. And it is important to note that there have been lots of rumours circulating over the last couple of days. But in many ways, you would also have to say that, Beijing has made Nancy Pelosi's position very difficult with some of the sharp responses we've seen in the build-up to her tour of Asia over the past week. Also today, the Foreign Ministry reiterated its position, saying that the military would not sit idly by, and spokesperson Zhao Lijian also spelling out why there has been such a strong response from Beijing, essentially that Nancy Pelosi is the number 3 US government official, and that any visit to Taiwan would lead to an egregious political consequence. But at the same time, one has to question whether this is being done simply out of principle by Nancy Pelosi, not wanting to be seen to be backing down to China, that of course would lead to some embarrassment, not just for herself, but arguably for the Biden administration as well. But certainly the stakes are incredibly high, and we are going to be watching the developments here very closely over the next day or two. Also, it's worth noting that this this nationalistic sentiment has been building up in China, also because of another event that's been taking place here. Monday marked the 95th anniversary of the founding of the People's Liberation Army, and that has certainly stirred those sentiments even further on a topic that people in China are very focused on.